David Avery is the head of clean tech in Switzerland Global Enterprise, which is Switzerland's trade and investment promotion agency in Zurich. And David is really our key expert in Switzerland on what the Swiss companies, the big firms, but especially the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, have to offer in this space of clean tech. David was also very strongly involved in the creation of an exhibition that we'll talk about later on about Swiss clean tech solutions. So very happy to have you here in Warsaw, David. Please join us on stage, and I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. For me, a great
That's great. Okay. A great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. Thank you very much to Ambassador for your kind words at the beginning, and to the Polish-Swiss Chamber for organizing the event today. Also, a big thank you to the previous speakers, Ambassador Bollinger and Mr. Wolański, for introducing many of the topics, and of course we heard here also in the panel from some of the people. So let me move on and say, for us at Switzerland Global Enterprise, very much partnership is absolutely key. And we already highlighted the interaction with the Polish-Swiss Chamber of Commerce, and it's sort of equivalent in Switzerland, if you want, the Chamber of Commerce for Central Europe. And we are also working not only with the government, working with the Swiss cantons, working with associations and clusters, which are a key part of interacting with companies and group of companies from these different sectors. Working also with a large network of experts, and of course being here today, a pleasure to be able to interact with you and other experts in the different market. Today, we're here to listen to different inputs on innovation, how technology has an impact, looking at sustainable development, and particularly the technology element of that. And Switzerland has a strong place at the table in innovation, thanks to the work that's going on and its track record, not only overall, but also in terms of environmental performance, where it's in the top 3, and for clean tech specifically, where it is also ranked in the top 10 in the world. And that is in no small part, of course, down to the network of research. I think we have heard already a little bit from CSEM, one of the, if you want, the more specialist research institutes, but also the powerhouses ETH and EPFL, along with other organizations such as EMPA, working on materials and buildings, EVAG, located close to them, who are working on water and water technologies, but many others. And the many others are super important because most of them are also interacting very strongly with our companies. And of course, it's that interface where the innovation is going on, the exchange of knowledge, building knowledge, and how it gets used in the market. And while I talk today, for me, it's really important that we make the link to the different sustainable development goals. What we're doing has an impact. What we're doing, we want it to have an impact. And for me, I've highlighted just 6, but the 6 where I feel very strongly that clean tech in particular, and through the work that we're doing, can have a strong contribution to change, particularly a positive contribution. And that is why clean tech, which has been built up in Switzerland over the last maybe 10 to 15 years, has become a very significant sector, employing obviously people, which is very important for the economy, and generating trade. And within Switzerland Global Enterprise, we are working majoritarily with SMEs, and trying to understand their needs, and we are tracking a particular group in cleantech, and we estimate that that group of around about 600 companies represent on their own more than 3.7 billion Swiss francs of trade. So I think there we can clearly see that this is not insignificant and is therefore something we really need to continue to foster. And today, as we look at innovation, what I wanted to do in talking about the technology for a green future is to take some examples. And to dig down a bit deeper, I think it makes sense that we look at the urban environment. And in that sense, we're looking at smart cities, the technology that can drive behind those. And in this index from IMD, looking at smart cities around the world, of course, it's very pleasing to see that Switzerland has 2 that are in the top 10. But more than that, that a survey that was done within Switzerland last year of 84 of the cities showed that more than half of them are actively driving projects in this area. And that of the 8.7 million inhabitants in Switzerland, we have roughly nearly 75% of them living in an urban environment. And that number is growing 0.8% per year. So it's really important that these centers are efficient. These centers provide good quality of life, but also contribute positively to change. And what does that mean? How can that happen? And here I want to dig in, and there are so many sectors, and I've got so little time, that I just picked some examples in several different topic areas. So for me, starting, it was highlighted already by Francesco from CSCM, the monitoring. And here one example is this company Distran, who are working and have been successful in gaining business here in Poland, who are working on industrial monitoring. But within our smart city context, maybe we are more focused on the urban environment, where water quality and the ability to measure water quality quickly, in this example 20 minutes rather than the normal 24 hours, but air quality, where we have direct online measurement, and measurement that of also in buildings from monitoring of electricity, we all know, smart metering, or also of heat, of cooling, of gas, of any substance, can be then aggregated through cloud data and used in management systems, which of course is where the smartness comes back in. So examples here for water monitoring platforms and grid management platforms, which of course we will need increasingly as the system, as we heard before, becomes increasingly complex over time. Talking about the buildings themselves, the EMPA is working along with other projects such as the Smart Living Labs in Switzerland to test in practical senses technologies and their impact on the living and the built environment. And I think we will very clearly see that the buildings themselves become the factories for energy of the future. Not the only ones, but clearly with building integrated photovoltaics, with photovoltaics on the roof, with the storage systems that they contain and the way they help us manage energy. And as part of that, one technology here, which is actually also from CSCM, of white solar panels, but actually solar panels that can be tuned to different colors. Why is that important? I mean, artistically it's great, but more important than that, of course, that allows us probably to sympathetically include these energy-efficient technologies also into historic environments, into city centers, and where we can obviously tune them so that they are not a visible part, but nevertheless a valuable contribution. And here also I wanted to talk a little bit maybe about the disruption of the building industry, where technologies of advanced manufacturing, for example, in this example with the 3D printing of concrete, could revolutionize the way we look at certain buildings. Thinking in a different direction, but also in our environment, about waste. Switzerland, unfortunately, produces a lot of waste per capita. On the positive side, that means we're actually have developed very good technologies for how we manage it. And here, at the beginning, the idea that waste needs to be sorted as early as possible in the process. What is there can then be collected, in this example, collected by an electrified vehicle, quiet and non-emitting within the urban environment, but also for people who have to deliver waste. Here, the idea that the waste can be attributed to the individual producer of the waste. And from what is collected, preferably pre-sorted, we can have systems to regenerate new raw materials. So 2 examples here, one producing carbon black and steel from tires, typically a waste that's hard to deal with, and the other producing biocomposites from plastic wastes. For the waste that is remaining, household waste, here how it is used. In Switzerland, we heard earlier the example from Bern. This is an example closer to Luzern, Perlen, of a waste-to-energy plant, probably the newest plant in Switzerland, where it is driving a local paper mill, driving a district heating system, driving through turbines also the production of electricity. And the remains from that process are being further processed to release new raw materials such as phosphor, copper, zinc, and others, which also allows for the ash at the end of the process to be even more inert and to be landfilled or to be disposed of with no special requirements. Electrification of buses is nothing new. We have the examples in Switzerland of these systems no longer requiring these permanent wire installations, but of rapid charging stations. Touched briefly on the idea of electrified vehicles to work in the urban environment, non-emitting vehicles for heavy industry. An example also here of a battery-powered ferry ship, which is running in Sweden, powered by batteries from Switzerland, but also last mile delivery as used by the Swiss Post in the bottom corner here, allowing for decarbonization in many industries. And talking about individual mobility then, also solutions from small vehicles, scooters, down to bikes. And to finish on also an inspiring note, CO2, of course, is seen as the culprit. We have problems with emissions. Here, a very direct approach to that, where CO2 is being collected at source, out of the atmosphere, and of course it's been used, it's great, we can produce drinks, sparkling drinks with it. It's used in the agriculture industry. But here, technologies from research now being applied where the CO2 can, with high temperature catalytics and solar, be converted into new raw materials. It can be made into organic molecules, which can then be used to create synthetic jet fuel. Of course, the goal here is to have a net zero round trip for the fuels that are used in planes, giving us potentially a route, a bridging technology for the decarbonization of the travel and flight industry. And for other difficult to decarbonize industries, such as CO2, here a technology which is developed where up to 10 kilos of CO2 per ton of concrete can be included, and 20 kilos of CO2 avoided in the process, leading to roughly a 10% overall increase in increase in efficiency, decrease in carbon dioxide emissions through the concrete production process. And with that, I'd like to turn my attention a little bit to the interaction between Switzerland and Poland. As I said before, we are looking at a group of about 600 companies, and we know that maybe 100 of those are actively engaged with Poland. Of course, there are other bigger companies that are really not on our radar. And we see a little bit the range of technologies or the range of business sectors where those companies are active. And that gives me great pleasure, because I think that shows us just the potential we have in terms of interactions between the two countries. And I'd also like to then say, yeah, today we haven't had a lot of time to discuss, but maybe some highlights and insights. And if that's whet your appetite, then we have more information available in the Clean Tech Report brochure to lead into the exhibition, which will be available, which we'll be visiting. So you will hear more about that, which obviously goes into more depth about some technologies, about innovation. And there are other reports which we are working on that go deep diving into different sectors. And of course, the one that is very close for me is this idea of the circular economy, because that feeds into so many different sectors and can have such a massive impact in the future, and not least, of course, because this event's part of the Circular Week. So hopefully you want to come and talk to us and to figure out with whom you can work. And my colleagues here from the Central European Swiss Business Hub, located at the Swiss Embassy, and myself and Katalin, who are located in Zurich in Switzerland, who can be the bridge for you to different technologies. And with that, my time is up, and it's been my pleasure, and I'd like to say a big thank you.